Welcome to the final day of racing for the Ocean Race Europe in Italy, Genoa. And if you've been following all the drama today, you will know that, well, we've been in a bit of a long postponement. Sally Barco is with me as ever. And Sally, a postponement for very good reasons, and for a lot of people probably thinking that that was it. But here we are with a bit of wind.
Yeah, what a great sight to see. You can see the pressure, the ripples on the water just creeping in. It went from like dead calm flat from the last images we see to now. You can see the streaks coming down, and hopefully the pressure will hold for a decent start here.
A decent start, and it will be, if it gets underway, a reaching start, and more on that in just a minute. But let's have a look at the scores going into today, because this is obviously very crucial. The overall scoreboard is there with Merpuri Foundation Racing Team sitting on the top with 18 points. But Sally, crucially, the podium isn't decided here. I mean, Childhood 1 could come up into it, and the lead that Merpuri has is wafer thin.
That's right. I mean, it's a little bit of who beats who. It's going to be a little bit of fighting, I think, for positioning on the starting line. So I think it's going to be super cool to check out who's going to be kind of in the dogfight and how Team Childhood actually pushes themselves, if they actually can get themselves up here on the podium.
Well, it's all going to come down to this race, if indeed it does race. And the important thing to point out here is we do have a time limit on this. So both the VO65s and the IMOCAs that are chasing the lead still will be adamant that the conditions keep improving and we do get this start gun go. There is Linked Out, and they are one such IMOCA 60. They're not at the top spot at the moment. And let's go to those scores now and just see what it is that that boat has to do in order to walk away from the Ocean Race Europe with the top spot. It's offshore Team Germany that they need to keep their eyes on at 14 points, Linked Out on 13 and 11th Hour Racing on 12. So unlike the VO65s, no one can step onto the podium that isn't there already, but 1, 2 and 3 could shuffle around based on the bonus points today.
That's going to be a little bit of a who beats who there in the top 3 of the IMOCA class.
Well, offshore Team Germany, well, maybe they've been hoping that the conditions would stay down. Maybe they've been hoping that there wasn't going to be any racing today, because that would see them walk away with the win. But the conditions are improving. And just on the left-hand side of your screen at the moment, you can see the yellow mark that signifies the pin end of the line. And the committee boat is in amongst the boats on the right-hand side. They are flying the blue flag of the Ocean Race. I think it's the one to the left-hand side of that bunch. Normally the boats are told to just stay to the right of the committee boat. So the start line now running horizontal across your picture between that yellow buoy and the committee boat, which is the left-hand side of those ones. Let's take a look at the committee boat now. And let's just see what we're flying here, Sally, because this is the crucial thing. So at the moment, and like clockwork, down comes the AP flag. So we are about to be in sequence. And as far as we can gather, as the norm in terms of the VO65 start first, then the IMOCAs start second, that's going out because the timing is crucial here. The rules state we have to get a start underway before 1400 local. The conditions are good. Let's start everybody together. So hopefully, Sally, that start line is long enough.
I think it looks long enough. You know, the boats are, yeah, they're 60 and 65 feet, but actually they're pretty maneuverable, and it's going to be all about the acceleration here off the line and who can peek their nose out into the clear air, especially on this reaching angle.
Well, breeze on the line, Sailing Poland is sailing down the line, and these two boats here are going to be in a fight with that team. Merpuri Foundation on the left, Axonabel Ocean Racing on the right. And, you know, Sally, we were talking about this. I'm very pleased to see everybody on both these boats eyes up, looking around, dialing into the breeze. It's so easy when there's a long postponement to talk yourself out of racing and sort of get into a bit of a casual mode that, well, it's a mountain to climb out of when suddenly you find yourself in sequence like we are here.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that in sequence, you're already in the positioning to how you're going to start the race. So I like how Merpuri already has the jib out. That was a huge thing for us when we were, you know, sailing on SCA, is that the jib is really helpful and maneuverable. Once you have to cut the engine, you need to keep a little momentum. And Axonabel, it looks like they're just going to go for the masthead, you know, for the acceleration. But I find that a trickier position because you have to be just perfectly positioned to deploy and accelerate.
A very good point. Tacking with the J1, doable. Tacking with the masthead code 0, a bit more of a struggle, and certainly something that if you get wrong, the speed's going to well, be sacrificed. And we've seen that, in fact, coming into the final stages of the offshore legs. Childhood 1 had problems with their furler. They weren't able to get themselves through the tacks easily, along with Axon Nobel Ocean Racing. So any of the boats on the masthead code 0 are going to be relying on that furler a lot. There you can see the difference, and there are the 3 key VO65s, Merpuri Foundation Racing Team, Axon Nobel Ocean Racing, and Sailing Poland with the red sails. 11th Hour Racing just coming into view. An 11th Hour Racing team in the IMOCA 60s can still very much go for the win. It looks, I mean, from our understanding, we thought we were going to potentially see the VO65s and the IMOCA 60s together, but because the conditions have improved a good way before that 1400 cutoff, I mean, the IMOCA 60s look like they're still in their kind of holding pattern.
I agree. They're all kind of on the outskirts. Nobody's really building speed, which is what you would need to be doing, especially in the IMOCA 60s right now in positioning. You're seeing all the 65s cross the line, you know, basically going away from the line, so they have one more maneuver to come back, and they're just going to time this. So they're all trying to get up to speed here. It's either going to be a tack or a jibe, depending on what side of the line they want to, you know, accelerate on. And it's a little bit of a timed run away. Some jockeying for position there with Axon Nobel, Sailing Team Poland, and I think that's Merpuri just below them. So we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, isn't it always interesting in that final race? 3 boats that have got to keep an eye on each other, and it's not difficult because they are less than 2 boat lengths apart. Amber Sail 2 quite close to the line, and we are coming up to that crucial moment. I mean, I would call it at around about 1 minute 30, 1 minute 45, where if you are not on your way back to the start line in these conditions, you're going to have trouble building your speed. The Austrian Ocean Race project, at the top of your picture, they're setting up for a committee boat start, but they have got Sailing Poland and Axon Nobel Ocean Racing and Viva Mexico that might potentially tack in underneath them and scupper their ley line into the start. It will just be the VO65s on this line. And in light winds, Sally, I mean, we are really tight together. It's not like somebody's just saying, oh, just give me space and clear air.
Yeah, and this is where I really like the J1 on Childhood Has It and Merpuri, because they're maneuverable. They can, you know, kind of sneak in just to lure it of somebody there, hold the fleet up, deploy and accelerate on their timing. I actually really like where Team Childhood is, which is straight in front of Merpuri. They're in between the line and their competitors. It looks like they're going to put up a fight here for a pretty great start.
Inside of that timing where you need to be on your run into the line, Sailing Poland to windward, but looking at that, the Austrian Ocean Race project will have no problem holding Bauer Becking out from the line. They're all a long way above ley line. I mean, it looks like Amber Sail 2 could almost lay the committee boat as well. It will be a reaching start, but of course, windward boat has to keep clear. So the first leg of this course will be a reach of around about 2 nautical miles. Sailing Poland trying to get over the top of the Austrian Ocean Race project with 40 seconds to go, but Bauer Becking is in trouble there. The Austrians are going to be able to hold those red sails up. Axon Nobel Ocean Racing, no breeze in the middle. They need to accelerate and they need to do it fast. Amber Sail 2 putting their bow up. They've decided that they were a little bit too close to the line, and that only gives Merpuri Foundation Racing Team more options there as the J1 comes down and the masthead code 0 becomes the sail of choice. Sailing Poland trying to find room at the committee boat end, but there was no room to be had for Bauer Becking, the veteran of the ocean race, now having to luff up. They are going to have to go round. They're not going to get a smooth start, and that masthead code 0 now becomes the worst sail to have in the air. The Austrians also forced above the line, and it's Axon Nobel Ocean Racing that manages to get just below them. I'm just waiting to see where that committee boat pulled out, and it looks like Axon Nobel Ocean Racing just squeezed through the line. Amber Sail 2 off to a good start. Childhood 1 down at the pin end. Viva Mexico, not the best, but with a lot better positions than Sailing Poland and the Austrian Ocean Race project. I mean, you could see that forming from a good minute to go.
You could, and Sailing Team Poland didn't have too many choices there. Oh, it looks like maybe Axon Nobel was over the line, or? It
might be Childhood 1's going back. Axon Nobel Ocean Racing, this has two possibilities. Either it's a general recall, and I think it is a general recall, looking at Amber Sail 2 coming round. So, Bauer Becking, the Austrian Ocean Race project, you can breathe a sigh of relief. I mean, guess we can put that down to everybody being pretty eager there and wanting to go back. Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team still going, and at this point I would be fairly confident it's a general recall. The Amber Sail 2 aren't going back yet, they've just stopped. So I guess at this point the reason we're still seeing those boats continue to go is a chance to, well, get a feel for what that moment's going to be like off the line, get a feel to sort of, you know, settle into the racing. Although saying that, Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team seem hell-bent on going as fast as possible.
Yeah, hard to, looks like, I mean, I don't know, maybe we can get some word from the race committee, but it looks like they're headed off the course here.
If this is a start, if this is the gun firing, if this is the beginning of the coastal race and everybody was over apart from Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team, then you could not wish for a better start. And I think, Sally, you are right. That is exactly what has happened here. Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team are now off, and they have 7, 8, 9 boat lengths clear of their nearest VO65. And the crucial thing is they are a long way ahead of Sailing Poland and Axonabel Ocean Racing, the two boats that needed to do an awful lot. Amber Sail 2, it looks like, are being called over the line. Perhaps they thought they were over the line, then they didn't get confirmation, they came back down, but now it looks like they are finally having to go back. And, you know, Sally, you've made some pretty good predictions, but the penalty of having that masthead code 0 up, this is the moment where it really seemed to hurt a lot of the teams.
It sure did, and you know, you saw coming into that start gun is that once you have that up, you are trying to accelerate and push the line, but there's no throttling back. So we saw a whole bunch of boats being over the line or being shut out at the lay line, and the maneuvers become a crazy situation on board where sheets are flying, winches are spinning, and it's you know, you think you're in a light air, calm race, but man, it gets pretty hectic.
Well, let's take a look at the tracker. I mean, what an incredible start, and what confidence from Johan Rashom and the crew on board Mirpuri, because, you know, I called that start, and I actually called it as a bad start for Mirpuri. It looked like they were a little bit bad, but they knew that everyone else was over. They had a good feel of where the line was, and this is where it pays dividends, because they're off now nearly 10 knots of speed. So when you joined us about, I mean, 2 hours ago, it was looking very unlikely we were going to get any racing in, and now we've got a pretty fantastic race, and certainly a very good race for Mirpuri. So, Sally, let's just talk about what they're doing here, because we're going to get a chance to compare like for like. So that looks like the J3 up as well, so a chance to get some more sails in the air for this reach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing they're sailing, well, I can't really guess exactly what angle they're sailing, but pretty tight to the breeze, so they've got the masthead up for full power. There's a little slot there with the J3. I think if you put the J2 up, you generally need a little bit more pressure, so they're trying to, yeah, maximize it, and, you know, really good job off the starting line there. When you're leading an event and you need to win a race to finish it off, you have to have those patience, you know. It's okay to trust your time and distance, and man, there they are, bow out and pushing to the next mark, which is just awesome.
I mean, really, really good start for this team. They have had their vulnerabilities, they have had their weaknesses. I mean, you don't have to cast your mind back too far. I mean, leg one, when they were leading a long way, and then they sailed into a pocket of no wind. So they're going to be taking this advantage, and they're going to be doing the maximum that they can with it. But at the moment, they're around about a quarter of the way along the first leg. There's going to be 3 legs in this coastal race. The reach that we're on now, then it's going to be upwind offshore, and then a downwind back towards the finishing area in the same area that we just started from. And just take a look at this lead here as the helicopter pulls out. And most importantly as well, the breeze is starting to look more and more solid. The thermal is coming in. So the closest boat here to Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team is Viva Mexico. And this is a boat that at the moment is at the back of the scoreboard. However, I mean, they have featured in some key moments of the race. I'm thinking leg 3, the start of the last offshore leg, they were round the top mark just behind Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team. So we know that they've got speed. They've just lost out in some of the offshore legs. So this could be a really good moment for this team to finish off the Ocean Race Europe, believing in themselves as much as I'm sure that their fans do, because there's a lot of good skill on board this boat. Obviously, Juan Villa stepping on board for the last offshore leg, just walking down the dock to say hello to some friends and basically being pulled on board. So there's some skill on board that boat, and I think I can see Juan on board, but they are the nearest boat to Mopori Foundation Racing Team. Let's just take a look at exactly where the rest of the fleet are, because there's some really key battles here. So, third place, Sailing Poland, and then the Austrian Ocean Race Project, Axonabel Ocean Racing, and Childhood One towards the back. And Sally, I mean, Childhood One needed a really strong performance, and they're going to have to do something phenomenal, really, on the upwind leg, combined with their rivals doing badly.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see what their setup is with their sails, but they're taking a lower road right now relative to the fleet, which on a reach you can just imagine it's going to be hard to push through the bad air of Mopuri, Viva Mexico, Sailing Team Poland, and you know, to actually make gains on this leg is going to be tricky for them unless the breeze shuts off to windward. So, well,
they're moving at the moment. I mean, interesting to see. Right now, it looks like everybody's got a good amount of wind. You know, a fair sort of amount of pressure in their sails. No one seems to be that much lighter than anyone else. Right now, for the leaders, Mopori Foundation Racing Team, we're seeing around about 7.5 knots. Childhood still doing quite well. But Sally, on this leg, there's not an awful lot you can do on the reach apart from just sort of hang in there.
No, but it's pretty interesting when we saw, you know, Mopuri Foundation, they had their jockey pole out just like Axonobel and the Austrian Racing Project. The others don't, and nobody else has their J3. So if I was Viva Mexico, I'm guessing they're going to be looking forward. The sail here, you can really see the masthead zero being trimmed differently. With the jockey pole on Mopuri, you know, it's really out and low and trying to basically make the slot between the sails as big as possible, probably because they have the J3 out. And you see Viva Mexico, it's a little bit more twisted. You have a little bit less control of the leech. And, you know, I actually think that Mopuri looks a little bit more powered up, and then you have Sailing Team Poland actually charging through the fleet. They made some gains in the beginning of this leg after having that, you know, full spin around at the start. So good credit to them. And there you see the boat speeds, which they're going to be, you know, this is just every 0.1, 0.5 of a knot you want to be gaining if you have a mode and the right setup with the sails.
Well, the race is underway for the VO65s, and what a dramatic start it was. I can't wait to watch that one back. Mopuri Foundation Racing Team in the lead with Viva Mexico in second place, and then Sailing Poland, one of the contenders for the lead, in third place, and Axonabel Ocean Racing, the other contender, at the back for now. But behind the VO65s, we also have more drama as well, because the Amoca 60s, the other class sailing in the Ocean Race Europe, are now coming in to the start line. Bureau Valet on the windward end of the start line. It's a reaching start, just like we saw the VO65s. Linked Out, Bureau Valet, both too close. An enormous bear away with Offshore Team Germany, lining themselves up much more comfortably. 45 seconds to go on the clock. Quorum and 11th Hour Racing both more towards the pin end. All of the leaders having to put the brakes on. If Offshore Team Germany start this one with Linked Out and Bureau Valet on their breeze, they're going to have a little bit of a hard time to try and punch out. But now, Offshore Team Germany pushing forward for the line. The bow slightly forward. 11th Hour Racing confident about how they've lined up this line. Bureau Valet still too early, flogging the sails along with Quorum as well. Both of those teams to win were being caught out much too close to the line. So it's Offshore Team Germany in the middle of the line, coming through the line nicely, and then with 11th Hour Racing Team down towards the pin end, just getting a little bit of space. Bureau Valet falling foul of, well, a lack of room at that committee boat end. The gun fires. No one turning around just yet, and by looking at the flags, it looks like it was a clean start. Bureau Valet just sneaking in at the committee boat end. That would have been very tight. Linked Out, looking good to windward, but again, Sally, Offshore Team Germany, looking strong and feeling quite strong, and they're going to be chasing down the VO65s and using what information they can have about the breeze. 11th Hour Racing to leeward. I mean, they need to make the best of this right now, otherwise they're going to have the other teams rolling straight over the top of them.
Yeah, but look Hit the speeds, you know, nice little pressure. I think we need probably a little bit more pressure to get the boats up on the foil, but we've all seen the images from the last legs. As soon as they get up on the foil, these boats are magic. And, you know, what a great angle actually here to the first mark. If there is a chance that they're going to get there, it's this angle.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm just looking at it now on the tracker, and with 11th Hour Racing Team to the left, to the leeward end of the pack, it almost seems like if anyone's going to get onto that foiling angle first, it will be those windward boats linked out. Bureau Valet, obviously, offshore Team Germany doesn't have the foil. That's not going to be what they're chasing to do. But I'm just watching the horizon now on 11th Hour Racing, and it did look like they were just starting to bear away a little bit. All of these IMOCA 60s with the foil just a little bit too tight to the breeze at the moment. However, I mean, Sally, this is where that kind of knowledge of your boat comes in. You get a puff, maybe just take it down to the left of run line, get the extra speed, and then in the light start coming up a little bit more. I guess that's an option the Americans have, being to leeward.
And obviously they're looking for any right-hand shift, right? That would lift them and able to press the bows down. And I think it's a really good point that, you know, 11th Hour has a free bow essentially. They can sail whatever angle they want, but they don't want to lose distance to that next mark. So if the angle is too close for them to be foiling, then that's just going to be the decision they're going to have to make. But nice pressure there in the middle, offshore Team Germany. You see the boat starting to heel up and press forward. And, you know, the two boats to windward of them, you're right, it's going to be really hard for them to push the bow down and get on any foil. And actually, I think the reality is that it's just too light. They're going to need more wind for anybody to really get flying here.
And light for Coram in particular there. I mean, I'm looking at their speed on the tracker. They're a little slower than the others. Don't be fooled by that ping with 11th Hour Racing. I think they're further ahead than that, just waiting for the latest ping from their transponder. But Coram have sort of slipped back a little bit. So the IMOCA 60s, there we go. Yeah, see, Coram, they're in danger now, and this is the danger on a long-reaching leg. I mean, they've only just started this leg. The VO65s that started, what, 10 minutes before them are about 2/3 of the way down this leg. So they've got a while on here, and on a reach, with boats going over the top of you, you can't tack out. There is so little that you can do. And that's why, in my view, it's pretty impressive that 11th Hour Racing have been able to keep that bow forward.
And it'd be interesting as they get closer to the shore here, if the breeze does turn right, making it a bit of an advantage for 11th Hour Racing to actually pop through to leeward at that angle. So it's just a little bit of leverage. You know, they have the advantage, like we were talking about before, where they can sail whatever angle. You see Charlie on the right on the tiller there. I find it really unique that these boats, they're large and they're heavy, and you just have this little tiller where you're trying to steer the boat perfectly. The feel must be really unique, whereas when you're steering with the wheel on the 65s, it's a little bit more fine-tuned. And I think with the tiller, you have to be really dynamic. You can't be all over the place. You're really trying to, you know, manage the loads of how the boat is going through the water, and that's a real skill. And I think we're going to see that, you know, as these boats sail more in this setting of a crewed fleet race.
Well, I think there's one thing that we have to mention here, because of course my mind was not in the foiling mode for the IMOCA 60s for the last few hours, because of course the breeze has been light. As you say, now it's up and there is that little bit of a chance. But it's not going to happen for 11th Hour Racing Team, no matter what the breeze does, because of course that left-hand foil was damaged at the start of leg 2, and so that's been removed. So they're sailing a different game, and you know, they'll know how they want to sail this boat, and they'll know how they can get the best out of it. But you know, it's something that we forgot, or certainly I forgot. They won't have forgotten. So this could be them starting in a slightly different place with a slightly different angle to the other teams, because they know their performance on this reaching leg will be requiring different things. At the moment, it doesn't seem to be hurting them at all. Bureau Valet to windward, again with a double heading there with their code 0 and then their smaller staysail jib on the inside. And at the moment, not really able to get anything down in terms of any lift from the foils or anything like that. So, I mean, Sally, once we come around that bottom mark, I mean, so much has been made about what offshore Team Germany have been able to do without a foil. Right now, they look pretty good. On the leg where you would imagine a foil would help, and we're about to turn upwind, that's got to be another good leg for the Germans, surely.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're really, they're obviously sailing the boat well, so let's not take any credit away from the sailors because they're dynamic, they're trimming the sails perfectly. They're actually, they're pushing the boat forward in the pressure. And my gosh, for all the onboards we've seen from them, the communication is really strong. They are trying to position themselves perfectly for what they know they have, which is exactly what's going to happen when they come around this next mark. They know that they can sail the boat, well, from the past couple legs, they can sail the boat a little bit higher and a little bit faster, which will be such an advantage on an upwind leg.
I mean, I remember the inshore, the coastal race that they just overhauled Mirpuri that we had in Cascais. I mean, incredible performance. So that's offshore Team Germany in the lead of the IMOCA 60s. Let's have a look at where all our boats are spread out on the water at the moment, because we have got racing underway now. The IMOCAs safely off the line, and then ahead of them, the VO65s. So last time we checked in with them, Mirpuri had a little bit of a lead over Viva Mexico, and it looks like Viva Mexico and now having to think about defending on Sailing Poland. We are coming into that first mark. Mirpuri is going to be rounding that mark very shortly, and then onto that windward leg. And I think, to be honest with you, for the boats behind them, they'll actually be fairly pleased to get onto that windward leg. Now we have tacking, now we have options, now we have some slightly different modes that you can sail in rather than just this drag race to the first mark. So Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team leading the VO65s, Viva Mexico in second, Sailing Poland in third, and then the Austrian Ocean Race Project, the winners of leg one, behind them in fourth. Axonabel Ocean Racing managing to, at the moment, it looks like, close up. Ambersail 2, a good way back as well. So Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team are now round that bottom mark. Going round behind them, it's Viva Mexico, then the red sails of Sailing Poland. Now, Sally, for those teams that are behind and you want to try and overhaul the leaders, Mirpuri, you'll be hoping that this course is not one-sided, as we would probably imagine sea breeze courses will be.
Yeah, that's right. You want some options. You want to be able to take leverage on, on whatever side of the course opens up and try to make some gains. And interesting here that Sailing Team Poland just tacked right around the mark and doing almost 180 degrees. Tricky with the boat speed because it's a large maneuver, but they're obviously see maybe more pressure out there, and an opportunity to split from Mirpuri or Viva Mexico.
Well, at the moment, for those leaders right now, the breeze is pretty much in line with that next mark. It's coming in at around about 170, which is the bearing to the next mark. So it looks to be a true beat in terms of angles, potentially not in pressure. Sailing Poland, well, it looks like they're going for the win. They are trying to do something different, but I guess, Sally, having the Austrians on top of Axonabel, they've got room to make a few mistakes before they need to shift into any sort of defensive mode.
Yeah, I think actually, they're just trying to get a little leverage, and you can see here from the helicopter view a little bit of pressure right out in front of Sailing Team Poland, and they're probably just trying to dig into that. And I think having clear air around this bottom mark is a big deal. The Austrian project giving Axonobel a little bit of clear air as they do the big maneuver to tack in front, and I'm guessing that everybody is looking for a little bit more pressure on the right-hand side of this upwind course.
Now, I mean, Mirpuri Foundation Racing Team certainly being spooked by Sailing Poland, and this is every tactician's nightmare. You need to keep in check with two, Sailing Poland and Axonabel Ocean Racing. One goes right, one goes left. What the hell are you going to do? I mean, you've got match racing underneath your belt. One-on-one is one thing. One-on-two, I mean, where do you even start?
Yeah, generally you have to start with, okay, who's closer to you in the moment, and you can't forget, we have a pretty cool sport in the fact that you have to sail your own race a high percentage of the time, and anything in these light air, you have to really be looking forward to figure out what's the best way to get around this race course. And, we have this land effect, and I'm wondering if it's going to be a little bit lighter pressure over there closer to land with Viva Mexico. Mirpuri look like they're just, you see the wake coming off the bow. They're just steaming ahead, and the advantage they have here is that they're actually bow forward slightly. Even though Sailing Team Poland has leverage to the right, Mirpuri's bow forward. So even if it's going to be really difficult for Poland to get around Mopuri, which means that they, if you see Axonoble on the far left side of the course as you're looking upwind, make some gains, you can actually, you know, give up some distance to go over there and protect them. So it's a really fun game. I love this tactical mindset. And, you know, these guys are, oh, looks like they're just moving all the way to windward. So they have a little bit more pressure. That's a really good indicator that they're in a good spot on the race course.
And on a good spot and happy to keep going this way. That is the VO65s round the bottom of the course. Let's take a look at where we are in terms of all 12 of our boats. So that's everybody round. One of the boats you're not seeing there is Team Childhood 1, but that's just because their ping has not updated. Do not be confused. They are not in that position. They've actually come round that leeward mark ahead of Amber Sail 2. But let's go into the IMOCA 60s. So when we left the racing here, it was offshore Team Germany in first place, and it looks like they're still doing that. 11th hour racing to leeward. It was Coram off the line who had struggled for a lane, and you can see that they're still suffering there. But Bureau Valet to windward weren't able to do what 11th hour racing has been able to do to leeward. So it wasn't so much clear air. I guess it was potentially just being able to put your bow down and having space below you to get away. 11th hour racing right now, we would imagine that as we get into this mark, it will still be offshore Team Germany in the lead. But they've got a little ways to go. They're about 2/3 of the way along this reach, so we've got a good few minutes left on this reach for 11th hour racing to try and get ahead of this boat here, offshore Team Germany. And right now, you've got to say that the 10-year-old offshore Team Germany boat is performing very well in the hands of an experienced team.
Yeah, what a great sight there. They're actually just, you know, even pressing forward a little bit, trying to get a little bit more speed. But, you know, hats off to 11th hour racing, and you know how to remember they don't have that foil. Obviously they know, but good reminder for us because they're actually matching, you know, the windward foil is clearly out of the water here, so no drag there, and they don't have a leeward foil, so I'm sure they're not thinking, oh, we set this up perfectly, but they kind of set this little reach up perfectly with not enough wind to foil and not having to carry any extra drag. So really nice to see them not quite bow even with Germany, but pretty close to be able to play the game on the next leg.
On board with offshore Team Germany, Robert Stanjek, the skipper on the right, holding on to the tiller. We've got Annie Lush, two-time ocean race competitor, on the left in the red cap. And then there's always something to grind, isn't there? There's always a little bit of work to do, no matter what happens. We've got Benjamin Dutroux on the back, just trimming the main. And even with these conditions, it's still those slight little adjustments there. But, I mean, this is a really good example of just how differently the IMOCA 60s would be sailed in this event and in the ocean race rather than, you know, solo. So behind offshore Team Germany, we've got Linked Out, and Linked Out have had an incredible event here in the Ocean Race Europe at times when you wouldn't imagine that the IMOCA 60s would perform, or in particular this boat upwind through the Strait of Gibraltar in 35 knots. This boat to windward outperformed pretty much everybody, I mean, including some of the VO65s, which on paper you would not imagine happening. So some pretty impressive moment right the way round the wind range, which does leave some questions over exactly what we're going to be seeing from the IMOCAs in the ocean race. Bureau Valet behind them, that leeward foil now underwater with that heel. I wonder whether they've got it down. I wonder whether they have raked it to give us that righting moment. And on board, I mean, that's a disorientating way to sail, isn't it? Facing backwards, just grinding whenever somebody comes through the speaker in your earpiece.
I think it's super interesting in the IMOCA 60s, the different setups. It's very subtle, but you know, the way that you can see outside of the boat, or you're under the cover, or which line you have close to you to make a quick adjustment. And you know, in these conditions, it was just nice to see offshore Team Germany. Everybody has a role, and they're really contributing. And like you said on the other one, sometimes it's a bit hard. You're looking backwards, you can't hear anything, you can't see anything, and you can't feel the wind. I think it's a really unique way to go on a coastal race. Obviously, these boats are set up a lot more for the rigorous, long offshore haul. But it takes a really good sailor to be in that little bubble cave and understand how to push the boat really hard.
Really interesting shot here of the IMOCAs coming straight into the camera. I mean, you could write an essay here on forestay sag and leach tension. Some very different approaches here, but we're sort of used to that with the IMOCA 60s because, of course, every boat is slightly differently constructed, slightly differently designed. So offshore Team Germany being one of those designs which are of an old generation, you know, no foils, 10 years old, but there is the next turning mark coming into view. They took the lead off that line, they've held it, and they have shown no signs of giving it up. And now they're about to go onto the upwind leg, which should be playing into their hands. They were able to point a little bit higher for the same speed as some of the other IMOCA 60s, and unless it starts getting much windier, those foils aren't really going to come into their own. At the moment, they're sort of drag. So here we go, round the bottom. Onto the upwind leg, the first of 3 legs completed, and offshore Team Germany in the lead, but 11th Hour Racing Team not that far behind at all. So Robert Stanjek steering offshore Team Germany around the mark, and look at this, this might actually be pretty close here with 11th Hour Racing Team and Linked Out just to windward. It looked by the previous angle that Linked Out might just be overlap, but I guess 11th Hour Racing Team sailing a little bit closer to the breeze might have a bit more speed, and they might just get round this mark in front of them.
And I think the big difference was you saw Linked Out go for a sail change because they're preparing for that upwind angle, which means they would have had a little bit of slowdown in speed. And I think that's just going to give the advantage to 11th Hour to, push forward here and round the mark with a little bit more pressure.
It's going to be a tough Leeward mark exit for Linked Out. You can see how close they are as 11th Hour Racing Team go round the mark. Linked Out go round as well. And what do they do here? Thomas Riant facing that problem of, do I follow in their dirt? Do I tack over? That might not actually be my tactics. Well, they're following for the moment, and Bureau Valet now changing to the upwind sail configuration to get themselves round. And then right-hand side out of picture will be Coram, still with a little ways to go. So Bureau Valet and Coram, 2 of the much later models in the IMOCA 60, and both of those teams with very little time to actually get to grips with their machines. And as you see them sailing around, you'll notice just how different every single IMOCA 60 is. And you get a new boat, it's a new way of sailing, it's a new way of trimming. And they haven't really had a chance to work that one out yet. So the data from this event will be valuable to them if the results haven't really been the confidence boost that they would have liked. So Bureau Valet are now going around, both foils out of the water. As soon as somebody points out that those foils just look like a moustache from the turn of the century, you can't unsee it. That's all I can see now as this boat comes around the mark. An incredible shape on those foils. Bureau Valet coming round, and Coram to their right, and they're going to have an awful lot to do on this upwind leg. I mean, Sally, at this point you almost sort of go, right, where's everybody else going? I might go the other way. Oh, well, saying that, Linked Out have tacked over, so whatever way you go, you're going to have to sort of pick your way through the middle, I guess.
Yeah, I think they're just going to have to, from here they have the advantage. Well, they have a slight advantage to look upwind and see which boat is going to go better on each side, and maybe just choose their lane to, not lose towards the front group on this next leg, knowing that they have a downwind on the next leg, which is you can actually gain from behind. And some of this is let's not do anything dramatic to lose more distance. Stay in touch with the group and see what happens on the next leg.
Well, Linked Out now heading out to the right. Interesting to see just how much communication and gesticulation is going on board those boats. They're still trying to get the best out of their machine, because let's not forget they are racing for the win here. And at this point as they go upwind, let's just remind ourselves here that offshore Team Germany are in the lead, both on the water and on the scoreboard. But if Linked Out can finish ahead of offshore Team Germany, then they will overhaul them with 11th Hour Racing Team in 3rd place at the moment. And if everyone finishes where they are, 11th Hour Racing will jump a place into 2nd. But that's the battle in the IMOCA 60s. Let's come out of that and let's check back in with the VO 65s. And they're around about halfway up the beat to the top. And this will be the only beat in this coastal race. This will be the only one. We've got Merpuri Foundation Racing Team in first place, Viva Mexico holding on after that mark, and now they've hitched over, so they've got a decent lane. But a big cross coming up here with Sailing Poland and Viva Mexico, and we'll see who manages to hold on to that top position, or that second place with Sailing Poland coming across. But a good bit of space here before we get into that windward mark, and hopefully for Merpuri Foundation Racing Team, they're going to be able to keep the breeze all the way in. And Sally, from the helicopter pictures there, I mean, it's patchy, but it's nowhere near as patchy as it was when we came on air 2 hours ago.
Yeah, I think you can see it. It's just a very slight, light sea breeze holding for the group, which is really great, because nobody wants to finish this race or this whole, you know, Europe race off with an abandoned coastal race. So give them a chance to stretch their legs, and you know the boats are doing well here with the masthead and making their way up the track.
Well, Sailing Poland has gone behind Viva Mexico. They were lining up for a close cross, and it looks like Viva Mexico has tacked on top of them to lock them down. Good news for Merpuri, that needs somebody to keep the other boats in check. The big ones that they need to look out for are Sailing Poland, at the moment, covered by Viva Mexico, and Axonabel Ocean Racing, which right now is sort of out by themselves, but they haven't been able to advance. You know, the angles are a little bit difficult to tell by that tracker, but Axonabel are not right now in danger in any way of being able to cross Merpuri. As we zoom in just there, you can see that they're basically pointing to the stern of the Portuguese boat at the moment. So this is the team that is winning on the water and on the score sheet, and right now the rivals not managing to do enough to get them in there. Amber Sail 2 and the Austrian Ocean Race Project a little bit further back, and in the mix as well is Team Childhood 1, but because they're having a little bit of a problem with their tracker pinging their position, I mean, it's almost like they're in stealth mode whenever we go onto that tracker, but the competitors will know where they are, and Team Childhood 1 still, I mean, time is running out, but they still can get themselves on the podium if they manage to get themselves into that top spot. They need to win. Sailing Poland needs to be off the podium. I mean, the chances of that happening are diminishing by the boat length. But those are our 1, 2, 3 on the scoreboard. Merpuri, Sailing Poland, and Axonabel. So this race so far, Sally, it's definitely going the way of the Portuguese.
It sure is, and you can see they're just in a nice controlling position here. They can focus on their boat speed, their setup. I think my gut feeling is that they're just a little bit more dialed into what mode they're sailing, how the stack is, and how the trim is, just because they've spent, you know, more time as a team on this boat, and they don't have to do anything crazy here. They're going to wait for either Axonobel or Sailing Team Poland to tack over before they have to make a maneuver, or if the ley line comes in, and then, you know, that'll be their next move. So they can just really focus on the boat speed and how the boat's, you know, going through these waves, and if they can you know, see any other different pressure up the course will be a big indicator of maybe what their choice of an angle is downwind.
And the big thing is that the breeze is holding as we go on board Axonabel Ocean Racing. The breeze is looking good. Now, Sally, this is going to be something that you're going to be helping us out with. It looked to me like a spare sheet just coming out in a bag, just to the right of that middle pedestal there. I mean, setting up for another sail potentially on the downwind reach into the finish. I mean, it looks like that they're rigging up for something.
Yeah, those are, so you see two of them there. There's two mesh bags and kind of in the aft part of the cockpit, which means I'm pretty sure they're going to be setting up for the A4 downwind. They don't have all the, well, depending on how you're setting them up the boat, if you run too many sheets through the blocks, you can imagine that's like a major friction as you're sailing with the masthead and you need to tack or maneuver. So they'll pull those sheets out when they're on their final approach. If they have enough time, they'll be setting up the A4, which means they'll be running those sheets, those spare sheets through the bags. And you see it, yeah, here you see, you know, Merpuri Foundation, they basically have the sheets around the head stay and back to the kite, and ready. They're really getting it all set up, ready to go there. And it looks like 2 people on the bow managing that, and you know, it's always good to double check, especially in this kind of position where one more big maneuver and you win this whole thing and you do it right. So it's good to have a bowman and a backup bowman, and you can even see from the wheel, if you're watching when they're setting up the sail, if something is twisted or over top of itself. You know, it's just so good to, it's a bit of the teamwork, right? Everybody has an eye on making sure things are going to be run cleanly for this next hoist.
I mean, it is their race to lose, basically, isn't it? I mean, the cleanness of the maneuvers at the top and at the bottom is going to be crucial. I would say less crucial is picking the right sail in the moment. They're going to get a chance to get that wrong, see the boats behind them make gains, and then try and rectify that. It's those corners that they really need to watch out for. Axel Nobel Ocean Racing are some way back at the moment, viewing on board. And we do know it's light. Look at that boom all the way up to windward, but Axel Nobel Ocean Racing will be trying to get the best of the breeze on that left-hand side of the beat as we look upwind. But let's check back in with the Imoca 60s, as the VO 65s still have about a quarter of the beat left to go till that windward mark. So positions for the Imoca 60s, and it looks to me, Sally, like we're seeing a lot more spread, a lot more leverage that 11th Hour Racing Team have been able to gain here. And 1, 2, 3 with Linked Out, Offshore Team Germany and 11th Hour Racing Team, though they are the big 3 boats. So we're set for something here.
Well, they are, and just before you saw the speed differential there with Offshore Team Germany actually down to 6 knots, and you know, 11th Hour and Linked Out more at 8 knots. So you'd imagine, you know, the gains on the edges here, which is a normal, consistent thing in lighter pressure. The farther you get to the outside of the course, there's a chance you get a little bit more pressure. But also these boats who are trying to overtake Team Germany, they're looking for leverage. So, you know, 11th Hour is pushing upwind here without that foil, like we talked about before. So what a good advantage. Who knows if they're actually strategizing, let's spend all our time on starboard first and see if we can make some gains. But you know, who knows what's going on. It's quite dynamic when you talk about these foils.
Well, just probably a good chance just to talk about the mathematics as well, because 11th Hour Racing Team are currently on 12 points going into this race today, and there's a maximum of 3 points available to the winner of the coastal race in both classes. 2 points for second place and then 1 point for third. And for 11th Hour Racing Team, I mean, they need to win, and they need Offshore Team Germany to finish with a boat between them, basically. And that's what they're going to need, Coram and Bureau Valet, to start stepping up and start getting themselves in amongst that mix. They can do it just with Linked Out, but the more these boats behind manage to close up and cause some problems for Offshore Team Germany or Linked Out, the better it is for 11th Hour Racing, or vice versa. But right now, Coram and Bureau Valet not being able to match the speeds of the other boats. So 2 boats going to the left-hand side of the beat, or the right-hand side of your picture as you see it now, 11th Hour Racing Team and Coram. And on the other side of the course, Bureau Valet, Offshore Team Germany and Linked Out. And they're not multi-hulls. But with those foils, it's fairly normal to see them limit the number of tacks like this.
Yeah, it is. I think that that's why we're seeing a difference in a spread, I think, from the 65s. These 65s are a little bit more maneuverable. You also don't forget that they've got more hands on board to make clean maneuvers. And the Imoca 60s, a little bit more of a drag race to the side. Let's not lose anything by doing any extra maneuvers, but the boats are heavier too. So the more you tack them through the water, the longer it takes, the more time you need to spend accelerating the boat, especially in this light air. It's generally not the, it's generally not the game plan unless you really have to.
Well, the good news is that we are getting breeze all the way up the course here. As everybody going up, no one has hit that big wind bubble. We're getting 9 knots of breeze at the windward mark, which is the furthest mark offshore. So the waiting has paid off, and I mean that for the sailors and for you at home if you've been with us. It didn't look like we were going to get any racing in today. It looked like the scores were going to stand, and that would have been great news for Offshore Team Germany and Merpuri Foundation Racing Team. They would have walked away with the win in each of their classes for the Ocean Race Europe. But now with 11th Hour Racing out on the far side of the course, Offshore Team Germany are trying to hold on to Linked Out, and we could see some upset in both the VO65 and the Imoca 60. And I mean, I wonder if we can just have another look at the tracker here, because one of the things that's interesting is the performance upwind of offshore Team Germany. So as we sort of come up and we can try and see the trails of the boat on the water, for offshore Team Germany compared to linked out, it would seem like that higher same speed mode that we've seen them able to pull out of the bag before hasn't really happened for them. I mean, maybe there's just not quite enough breeze for them to sort of pinch up like that. So far, they've just been sort of running parallel with linked out.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little hard to see on the tracker, but you know what we can't see on the tracker is the real-time wind. So whether they're in a little bit of a light spot in the center here of the course, but you definitely see in the lower speeds, we don't have their bearing, so we can't say, you know, okay, they're going 5 degrees higher or anything like that, which would be a gain. But we could definitely see the less, you know, the lower boat speed. But you know, there's good sailors on all these boats, so they are talking about this in every moment. We're going higher and faster, are we going lower and slower? You obviously want to be hearing higher and faster, or higher and same speed, or same speed and higher. So it's, you know, it's an assessment at every moment. And yeah, there's a better look of offshore Team Germany. And yeah, you're right, they haven't been making the big gains forward. So good job on linked out with the foils to hang there with the angle. But you know, I'd say that offshore Team Germany is still in a controlling position with the group, able to tack on linked out if they need to. They need to tack back towards the center of the course, or at least towards the mark here, you know, before the ley line in the next, you know, 10 minutes, I would say.
Well, while we leave the IMOCA 60s around about halfway up this beat, let's go back to the VO65s, because they're zeroing in on that windward mark, and the important thing has been what's paid, the left or the right. And so far, we haven't had a huge change on the water. Merpuri Foundation Racing Team certainly still hold on to the first place. And Sally, this is that buzz of activity that you were talking about, getting set up for multiple sails on the downwind.
Yep, and you can see they're going to have to make a sheet change here. So they're going to use that leeward runner pedestal there, just getting the wraps on it. And they're going to take the sheet from the masthead and basically trim it from there, which basically when they go for the A4, they're going to have another winch free either to windward or on the primary to actually be trimming that, you know, downwind sail straight from a bigger winch, or powered winch, I should say.
They're coming. I mean, what's interesting to me is that they are fighting really hard as if there's a boat right on their tail. I mean, they're putting in that amount of energy to it, as you would expect with any professional racing team. But just look at the amount of space that they do have. They're looking reasonably good for the ley line here. I'm just trying to spot the inflatable mark coming into view. It should come into view on our right-hand side. There's a gaggle of boats up at the top, and it will be just to leeward of them. But there's no other VO65 around, so they managed to stretch out on that first reach. It looks like they've been able to play the smart game and extend on that upwind leg. And as the helicopter just moves around, I mean, the nearest boat to them, Sailing Poland and Viva Mexico, still got a little ways to go. There you can see the windward mark on the right-hand side, the yellow buoy. The ley line looks good for this team. I mean, so far, Sally, so far, and I know I'm going to jinx it, but they haven't put a foot wrong.
No, they haven't. That you could just feel, you know, when we were on board before, the energy and the excitement and the adrenaline pumping through everybody. They want to get it right. You know, they're showcasing their skills right now, and to have a really clean turn around this mark, a nice sail change, and even more extension on the next leg, gives them just so much to work with as a team. Okay, we did this right, we did that right, we're going to focus on these areas for improvement. But you know, there's actually nothing better. You've been sitting around for a couple hours in the drifter, and now the boat's powered up, moving forward. Everybody loves the wind in their face, and they're winning, and they're about to win this whole thing. So let's hope we didn't jinx it. But really good teamwork on the boat, and yeah, good energy and watching the boat just make gains on the group.
It would be cruel for them to lose the race at this point. not least just because they were the only boat that managed to play the start line correctly. They were the only one that basically got off the line clean without either having to loop back round for the committee boat or being called over the line. So they're round the windward mark now. There is a good gap. There is nearly 10 knots of wind speed. So the crucial thing will be what that angle is going to be like from this mark, whether it's going to fit into that power angle on the masthead code 0. And in fact, as we say that, look at that, Sally, new sail coming out of their hatch.
Yeah, that'll be the A4. I think we've seen a really nice improvement with this sail design.
Problems on board here. The tack of A4 was not connected to the pole. This is what we were talking about. The only thing that could go wrong with this boat was not going to be sail choice, it was going to be the corners. It was going to be how they were going to get the sails up and down. So right now, the sail is flapping out the back of the boat, and there we can just see Rob Bunce managing to get a hold of it and managing to bring that one forward. I mean, we saw this with Childhood 1 coming into the finish, but we have not seen a mistake like that from an experienced team.
And you can see the sail inverting there, and they're going to have to grab the actual front of it instead of, they'll have control of the sheet side, which is the clue, but they're just struggling to grab the tack, and they're going to have to run that all the way forward. It's going to be interesting to see how they recover here. The good thing is they still have the masthead out. They have a lot of hands on it. As it like catches the wind, it can be a super strong sail, and you got to be super careful you don't get pulled off the boat. But I'm guessing they're going to bring it all the way in. It'll be interesting if they recover the A4 or they just say, okay, take a deep breath, let's get downwind here with the masthead and not try to make another mistake.
The hard work that they have done, I mean, that good start, the good reach, now the good beat, that has given them a bit of a buffer. Behind them, Sailing Poland has overtaken Viva Mexico in the final stages up to that windward mark. So Sailing Poland are now the next boat round that windward mark. And if you are Sailing Poland and you're watching the Portuguese do that, you're thinking, come on, it's not, you know, we might have a chance.
Yeah, and you can see there they go for the A4, and their tack is connected, so the sail is, you know, held on by 3 points. And we have seen good gains with these A4s downwind, so if, you know, Milpuri don't recover the A4, I would imagine Sailing Team Poland is going to make some gains.
Well, Viva Mexico are next to go round, and we've seen this from this team before. They've got it in them. They've certainly got the speed, and they've certainly got the performance. They've just fallen foul of some of the situations that have been happening out on the offshore legs where, you know, there is a little bit of bad luck out there, and unfortunately they've been unlucky with the amount of bad luck that they have had. But now they go for their A4 as well, and I've got to say, Sally, I'm sure your eyes are just like mine. It's just glued to the end of the outrigger, just the bowsprit, just to make sure it's actually attached.
Yeah, and to be fair, you know, on Milpuri Racing, it could have come undone. So really, we saw them fully check the systems. There was people up there, and it's something that we talked about before. You definitely double check. It could have gotten tripped, but we also know that the teams have not had a ton of boat handling experience with the A4s, and they're different. You can tell they're a soft sail. They're not foiling. They used to be the A3s, which was just a foiling sail. It made the mistake less, but the boat didn't perform as well with it. So what a great advantage to have a nice soft spinnaker. You can go faster at a lower angle downwind. But yeah, it's a tricky crew dynamic when you have a soft sail, a big soft sail like that to manage up and down.
And I wonder whether we're seeing the way that they are hoisting the A4 in the Ocean Race Europe, the first event that they've had a chance to use it, whether it's going to be the same when we get to the Ocean Race. I mean, in the Imoca 60s, we're used to snuffers, you know, socks for the spinnakers. And I know that a couple of the teams have been sort of toying with that. No one's needed it, or certainly employed it in this, but that A4 has featured a lot in this race, and it will feature a lot in the future. But for the Ocean Race Europe, it hasn't featured for this team here, the Austrian Ocean Race Project. They are the one boat that haven't been able to get their hands on an A4. It hasn't held them back. I mean, in the first offshore leg, they were victorious. They managed to pip the other teams on the line. And with that masthead code 0, I mean, it's not a small sail in itself. It's just that the A4 just gives you a little bit more choice.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the last two races, this A4, or the masthead 0 was, you know, was a choice going downwind in certain wind conditions and certain angles. So it's not going to be a huge problem for them. One thing it does do, which we saw I think it was a big advantage coming in on the first leg into the finish was that it was easier to maneuver. So you have a masthead, it's actually easier to find the like a wind seeker type of sail. It's flatter, and you don't have to go for a big sail changes and make any losses. So, you know, at some points on the race course, a tiny advantage for them when it was 20 knots going dead downwind. Obviously not an advantage, but you know, something they can look forward to as they keep building their sail inventory.
But one of the things with the A4 is the amount of work that it does require. A lot of trimming. It is a downwind spinnaker, and it'll be interesting to see as the Imoca 60s are now coming up to that windward mark, what sails they deploy for that downwind. It's not a true downwind. We saw that with the VO65s going down. So it is going to be one-sided. But let's have a look and see how this three-way battle at the beginning, at the lead of the Imoca 60s is playing out. Offshore Team Germany at the moment look like they are managing to hold off Linked Out. They are doing pretty nicely on the far side, so Offshore Team Germany are going to be able to sit on top of Linked Out when they tack over, and I think they have done that. But Offshore Team Germany, Linked Out coming in from the right, 11th Hour Racing coming in from the left-hand side, and it will be interesting to see how these fleets come together. And Sally, just look at the speed differences here. I mean, I know that we've just seen Offshore Team Germany put the tack in, so we'd expect their speeds to be a little bit down, but it's difficult at this point to call whether one side or the other has paid. I mean, 11th Hour Racing above 9, Linked Out, well, way above 9.
Yeah, I mean, really nice to see these speeds coming through on the Imoca 60s, just because, you know, the upwind angles, they're probably pressing a little bit for maximum speed. And yeah, here you got Linked Out and Offshore Team Germany close to this ley line, also 11th Hour. So this could come right to this mark. If 11th Hour Racing has made gains, you know, they'll have an advantage by one less maneuver around this top mark.
Interesting to remember that Linked Out and 11th Hour Racing were half a boat length apart at the bottom. Have sailed completely different courses upwind, with 11th Hour Racing Team only doing one tack. The same for Linked Out, but on the other side. We can tell shortly which side of this upwind beat has been beneficial, because there was nothing in it between those two boats at the bottom. Offshore Team Germany sitting between them, and the interesting thing here, Sally, is not going to be much, but Linked Out and Offshore Team Germany are going to be sailing through the dirt of the VO65s.
Yeah, a little bit of dirt, but one thing that is their advantage is because of well, the 65s are, you know, holding on their course on port, which means there's probably at least there's not a negative shift, at least probably feeling a bit of a right-hand angle, which can give an advantage to Offshore Team Germany and Linked Out coming in on starboard upwind to this mark, which means they're not fighting a header. And we'll have to have a look at 11th Hour and see if it's a tougher angle coming back for them to the top mark.
Well, Offshore Team Germany are getting ready for that downwind reach. It's the same level of energy that we saw with Merpuri Foundation Racing Team when they ran at the top, but unfortunately for the Germans, they do not have that much of a buffer. It's going to be tight at the top, and it's going to be tight on that reach. We just saw at the back getting the aft outrigger ready, so that's a good sign that they are going to be using some of their big downwind sails. Robert Stanjek still on the helm. There goes that aft outrigger. And they are, I mean, it's interesting, a bit of a melee of boats coming in here. I'm still watching their speeds. And Offshore Team Germany are a little bit slow here. 7.8, 8.2 at times, 9.6, 9.3 for their nearest rivals. 9.5 now for Linked Out. So Bureau Valet and Corum, we knew that they weren't going to had a chance to get onto the podium, and it looks like they're not really going to feature in this coastal race. It is going to be Linked Out, Offshore Team Germany, and 11th Hour Racing Team as we get closer and closer to that windward mark. And there's nothing that any of these teams can do now tactically. As soon as they opted for that one tack beat, that's it. You've got to sail with the breeze you've got. I mean, if somebody attacks you, there's nothing you can do. Just got to sail in.
Yeah, just have to sail in, and like we've talked about a lot before, it's about the modes, it's the subtle trimming. You can see the Traveler coming down down here a little bit. So they're navigating through the Volvo 65s, but they're also trying to manage the pressure forward, pushing the boat forward, and how they are on the ley line, and full adjustments all the time. And they've done. It looks like they're settled. They're set up, ready for the tack and the deploy of the bigger downwind sail.
From that shot, you can just see out to the left, you could just see 11th Hour Racing Team sort of looming, coming up on that port. So let's just talk a little bit rules here, because we're a bit of a way off from this windward mark, this kind of convergence between Offshore Team Germany, 11th Hour Racing and Linked Out. By my very poor eye, it does look like Offshore Team Germany might just be able to hold on to the lead. Linked Out on 11th Hour Racing Team, that's going to be a different situation. And for Linked Out coming in on starboard, they should have right of way. They're going to be inside at that mark, but then they've also got a tack to get round it. So they might have right of way initially, but then they're going to have to sort of, well, they'll slow down.
They'll slow down. They should be, you know, if they're clear ahead, then it's very straightforward. You tack around the mark. 11th Hour, it'll be tricky. If you basically can't put your bow in between the mark and the tacking boat is kind of the way to look at it. But, you know, you saw Annie Lush there on Offshore Team Germany. She's seen this situation a million times, I can guarantee you, because we used to round match racing marks like this, and you saw her hands going. She's directing traffic. Okay, guys, you know, this is the 1, 2, 3 of the priorities of what might happen. So really cool to see the different dynamics of sailors' backgrounds coming into this tight racing, and you know, having confidence about what the rules are going to be and how we're going to position our boat, and naming out the priorities. And I think that's a big advantage of Offshore Team Germany. They have the Olympic sailors, they have the match racers, they have the offshores, and they're all working together to put the boat in the perfect place.
And the place where they are is just to the right of your picture now. We're on with 11th Hour Racing Team, and they are coming up on port to this windward mark. Offshore Team Germany, Linked Out coming up on starboard, and you can see the other boats when we go to the onboards, their rivals starting to loom large in that picture. Bureau Valet and Coram struggling in the middle of the course, but there with Linked Out and Offshore Team Germany, and I can certainly see 11th Hour Racing Team in both of those onboard views. Just waiting for Offshore Team Germany to sort of ping back to life. But there you can see just to the other side of the rigger, and 11th Hour Racing Team Sally, they're getting awfully large. They are, and it's going to be an interaction here. I mean, we're just guessing on the angles, but the way how forward 11th Hour Racing is on Linked Out's bow basically gives you an idea that they're well, I'm not going to say that they are crossing, but for my eye, it looks like they're going to be crossing. And the same thing with Germany, as 11th Hour was further back, angle on the bow, on the hull there, that I'm guessing Offshore Germany will tack clear ahead. But that's a better view, yeah. That's a good view, and that does look, you know, I think you are absolutely right. Offshore Team Germany are going to go around, but this tack is going to cost them speed. So they're crossing comfortably. They will get around that mark first. However, 11th Hour Racing Team will close down that distance. The big question is, where is Linked Out? Because they were just behind Offshore Team Germany, and it's a slow tack for Offshore Team Germany. They're having trouble there, furling their big Code Zero at the front. They're having real trouble doing it. They've only just been able to get the bow through the wind, and that sail is not yet clear of the forestay. 11th Hour Racing Team coming in behind them. They are going to be closing in that distance a long way. This is just the positions as they were approaching just a moment ago into that mark. So you can see how close Linked Out was to the stern of Offshore Team Germany. Linked Out behind Offshore Team Germany. There we can go on board with Linked Out. They will know that Offshore Team Germany had a little bit of problems at that mark. We're just waiting to see exactly where 11th Hour Racing emerge from the left-hand side, but they are round, and look at that, Sally. So the helicopter gets into a better view, and that tack for Offshore Team Germany, we said that it was going to slow them down coming in on starboard, and it has done just that. Yeah, it was super costly, right? They have the bigger front sails on, which means they have to furl it to actually get through the tack. And good job on Charlie Enright, 11th Hour Racing. They were a bit over ley line. You saw their speeds increasing up to 10.5, 10.6, 10.7 knots. And that gives them the freedom to put the bow down. If somebody makes a maneuver, they just sail through. And that's exactly what they did, like solid maneuver. And I'm guessing they're going to go for a bigger downwind sail here. And
try to push off to the finish line. But too bad for offshore Team Germany. Tricky tack right at the mark. You saw them heel up, lose a bit of distance, and then actually have to, go for a big furl, and they're just behind on the maneuver.
With the scores now, with 11th Hour Racing Team in first place, if Offshore Team Germany can hang on to second place, it's not enough for 11th Hour Racing Team to win overall. They need to get linked out in between them. So Offshore Team Germany are going to be fighting pretty hard to stay in that second place. But this would see linked out drop into third, 11th Hour Racing Team into second, and it would certainly put some chills down the spine of the crew on board Offshore Team Germany, because they need to work hard at this point. But Sally, let's just talk about this downwind run, because there you can see the scores as we were just talking about them. So it's not over yet for Offshore Team Germany. They are still very much in this fight, but they cannot afford to lose any more ground. This downwind leg then, Sally, now that the VO65s have gone round and we're starting to see their track, it's not a true downwind, but at the same time, it's not a reach. We are seeing a few small jibes from the VO65s. Now, for Offshore Team Germany, they've come into this and they've always said that they were quite confident with their VMG downwind. They could kind of go lower, but I don't think it's going to be enough on this.
And you kind of see them setting up to leeward and behind 11th Hour Racing, so they have a little bad air to deal with. And in this light air, I don't know, I think they're going to need to make some gauge to leeward to get some clear air to actually see those gains, or they're going to be heated up and come behind 11th Hour. But like you talked about in the scores, they're probably just holding on. They're probably more worried about linked out right now than 11th Hour, staying out of the bad air 11th Hour, but not losing any distance to linked out. You know, kind of a three-boat race here. It's difficult to magically put boats between each other. So, but sometimes it does happen. I mean, we've seen crazier things, and linked out just rounding the mark there, which means that Offshore Team Germany do have still a little bit of a buffer in distance, so they can hang with 11th Hour and not probably stress too much, but just focus on their angles.
Well, as you say, I mean, the big relief for Robert Stanjek and the crew on board Offshore Team Germany is the fact that Coram and Buer-Valet are behind, and they don't show signs of getting in between that mix. So for Offshore Team Germany, theoretically, they could let 11th Hour Racing Team just sail off to the horizon. It didn't really matter how much of a lead they get, still only 1 point. So for the moment, Offshore Team Germany still sitting in the top spot on the overall scores. Meanwhile, let's go back to the VO65s, who are now around about 2/3 of the way down this run. So they are getting into that finish line. And as I say, Sally, we have had a few little jibes, and Murpuri, they've certainly suffered from that failed hoist, shall we say, at the top of the course, because Sailing Poland are now just to leeward of them. And Sally, let's just talk about what might happen here on the jibe, because both of those teams are not laying the finish, so they're going to jibe. And with Sailing Poland being behind but to leeward on the jibe, that rotation, that's going to put them into a really strong attacking position.
And I really like the position Sailing Poland is in. Obviously, they're gaining distance to leeward. Oh, and you see the A4 back on Murpuri. So we can say that they're going to be able to match angles and speeds. Not that they're one's on the masthead and one's on the A4. But once they go for the jibe, like you're saying, Sailing Team Poland will have the advantage, because first they're going to get the pressure first. But the Murpuri Foundation team will have to navigate their clear air. So I would imagine, you know, Sailing Team Poland's going to push Murpuri as far as they can to the ley line and have a chance to sit on their air all the way into the finish.
And the interesting thing is Sailing Poland is made up of a lot of youngsters. I mean, obviously, they do have people like Bauer Becking on board, who is a real veteran of the race. But the youngsters on board Sailing Poland, they're all 29er sailors. They all sail day in, day out with asymmetrics. And this is a classic asymmetric attacking move. You know, play the long game. Think after the jibe. Get low, you know, get below them, and then we'll see what happens. And Viva Mexico are, again, another boat that could also, just looking... They're slightly to the right of Murpuri's line. They could also put a bit of bad air on the Portuguese after the jibe.
They could, especially here. They can see the sailing jockey hands, how we're going to position ourselves. But they're, you know, they have a chance at least to make the Murpuri team sail a tighter lane to the finish, which can also be a big gain for a boat from behind. If you make the boat ahead sailing in a trickier spot, you know, that could be an advantage.
I cannot wait to see what happens after this jibe, because the question is, if you're Murpuri Foundation Racing Team, do you jibe now, or at least when you get a little bit of pressure, and then if it doesn't work out, you can jibe back? But if you hold on all the way to the finish, hoping that the situation changes, and it doesn't, then you're stuck. Now, they are trying to wait. They are feeling nervous here because they are trying to wave away the traffic on the water, because even a little bit of unwanted wake on their boat, they're not happy about it. And I'm sorry to say, it does look like our chase boat. So I hope you are enjoying these pictures, because in a minute that chase boat is going to have to move. Sailing Poland to leeward. They look nice where they are. They look like they've got power. And as you say, Sally, at the very least, they'll be able to match Murpuri Foundation Racing Team. And they don't actually have to overtake them here. They just have to stay in that position so that on the jibe, suddenly the breeze is very much in their favour. Bernardo Freitas just looking to the right, Nico Lundgren just coming back as well. They'll know what move Sailing Poland is doing, and there you can see it as well forward, that little bit of yachting karate. They're all seeing this move being played out.
Yeah, to me it's a lot about the distance they have forward versus the distance they have on the other jibe to the line. So if it's longer on this jibe, they can afford to wait, see if they can actually gain back down to Sailing Team Poland, gain a little positioning. But if it's getting longer the other way, we say that the sooner you have to go. So the longer it is going on starboard, basically to the finish line, the more effective Sailing Team Poland can have on the Murpuri Foundation. And there goes the jibe from Murpuri up.
Here's the jibe. Here is the moment. This is the test to see whether Sailing Poland have been able to get themselves in that position. That's the perfect shot. Let's try and stay with it here. Sailing Poland's coming across. They've got breeze, they've got power. The question is, does Sailing Poland try and take a piece out of them now? Or do they go for the jibe and use that position that they've got to try and rotate on their breeze? So Murpuri Foundation, it looks like Sailing Poland just going out of view on the right-hand side. They're heating up. So potentially this whole thing has been a little bit of a ruse here. It looks like Sailing Poland are actually quite happy to go the other way. Murpuri Foundation Racing Team are on starboard. Sailing Poland are on port. They need to go behind them. But there they were, lining up for the attack after the jibe. And actually, no. We wanted you to jibe first. We wanted you to think we were going to do that. We actually want to get to this side of the course. So wheels within wheels here. I mean, tactics within tactics. This is quite an impressive display. Sailing Poland are certainly really trying to outthink their rivals.
Yeah, one advantage they might have they will have by doing this is coming into the line on starboard. If it gets that close, which they just ducked each other, they sailed within a boat length of each other, so it should be close to the finish. Gaining a starboard advantage, but also possibly just one jibing in, so gaining an advantage on one less maneuver.
And with the mathematics here, Sailing Poland, they can still win the event overall, but they would need to finish ahead of Murpuri Foundation Racing Team, and then they would need Murpuri Foundation Racing Team to finish off the podium. They need the maximum of 3 points, and the Portuguese can't have any. So, we're racing for every result, of course, but for Sailing Poland, their biggest thing is if we can finish ahead of the Portuguese, then that's one more point differential between them and AkzoNobel Ocean Racing. So some interesting maneuvers happening out on the water before we get to the finish here in the VO65. But before we do get to that finish, let's go and take a look at how things are playing out in the IMOCA 60s, a little way behind. We're just going to take a bit of a snapshot because we want to get that finish in the VO65. So we were talking before about exactly how this soft downwind was going to work out for offshore Team Germany, and so far it's not working out very well. 11th Hour Racing Team to windward look like they're able to get the speed to go over them, but offshore Team Germany at the same time, I mean, this is what we were saying before, Sally. They're sailing low, they are defending against any advance from Linked Out, and that's the boat they need to watch out for. We're going to go back to that in a minute, but while the VO65s are so close to the finish line and so much is at stake, let's stay with them. So Murpuri Foundation Racing Team now heading off to the right-hand side, almost being sort of dummy jibed that way, shall we say, by Sailing Poland, sort of teased to defending that side. Well, now the Polish team are on the side that perhaps they wanted all along. Axonabel Ocean Racing behind, and it doesn't look like they are going to be able to do enough to improve their situation on the scoreboard. In fact, it looks like they are going to move down a position from second to third, because the one boat that's also in this mix is Viva Mexico. They're not going to improve from where they are on the scoreboard, or at least they're not going to close up to the podium very much. They might be able to, there we can see, they might be able to push Amber Sail 2 down, but them being in this mix, I mean, it's a headache for Axonabel Ocean Racing, basically, Sally.
Yeah, and you can see Sailing Poland move up the ladder there with these positions, which is really nice. And you saw the last shot of Axonobel being a good distance behind the fleet here, so it's a little bit out of their control, and really good job on Viva Mexico hanging in the group. And I see they're choosing a good angle downwind and basically making slight gains on Sailing Poland. As Sailing Poland goes into a jibe here, I'm guessing they're close to a ley line on the finish, which maybe is just coming up on our screen in the very far left corner. And you know, if they can lay the finish here and beat Milpuri, what a great downwind for Sailing Poland.
I mean, what a way to finish this event. I mean, absolutely, especially considering the heartache at the finish of the last offshore leg when they were leading that leg off the start line. And then they made some bold tactical moves. They were leading again, and then they lost it, just coming into Genoa. So if they can perform well here on that final race, that's a really good way to show everybody what that team could potentially do for the future, along with this team here as well, Viva Mexico, another team that haven't really had a chance to show their full potential. But now, boat on boat, they are certainly looking like they are showing the race leaders how to do things. And the interesting thing will be what the breeze is like for Milpuri Foundation Racing Team. Is it Sailing Poland and Viva Mexico that might just manage to slip past? Both of these teams have now jibed over to what looks to be the ley line to the finish. Milpuri Foundation Racing Team, you can see on that picture in the top right-hand corner. So they are going to be wanting to jibe pretty soon to start coming back in. But for Sailing Poland, all they need to do now is keep things the way they are. If they can finish ahead of Milpuri Foundation Racing Team, then it looks very likely that Sailing Poland are going to be finishing this in second place. Axonabel Ocean Racing losing out and finishing in third. And unfortunately for them, I mean, that chaos at the start line with only the Portuguese managing to come away, and Axonabel Ocean Racing never really recovered. But Sally, right now, not quite the way of the Polish team.
That's for sure. You can see Milpuri Foundation coming in on a strong port angle. We can't quite see if they're laying the finish, but they're crossing now Sailing Poland, which, you know, is actually speaks to a great recovery. We saw their, you know, hiccup at the top mark, and they had quite a big lead, and now they're, you know, they're back in the game here, fighting for the front of this race.
It looks good here for Milpuri Foundation Racing Team. The only step that they basically made wrong was that incident at the top mark. Not something that's exclusive to them. We have seen some of the other teams have some problem with the A4 as well. And as you say, it might not have been human error. It might have just been something that pulled. But that was a bit of a spook, and it certainly let Sailing Poland have a big piece of them on the downwind leg. But Bauerbeking is going to need to get some more. He's coming in with power. Milpuri Foundation Racing Team look to be sailing perhaps a little bit lower, but there we can see the finish line coming into view. That looks to be the finish yacht with the flags flying. So Milpuri Foundation Racing Team about to come across the finish line. It so nearly went the way of Sailing Poland, but the Portuguese take it. Johan Rashom and Milpuri Foundation Racing Team cross the finish line to win the coastal leg and win the Ocean Race Europe. Well, Sally, very, very, very tight finish, but a really good finish here for Sailing Poland. That's a strong performance.
It sure is. You could see how hard they pushed the boat downwind. They didn't make any big mistakes. They climbed back through the fleet. If you remember their start, they did a big circle at the committee boat, and that just goes to show that they're sailing the boat well. Bauerbeking has these young kids really under wraps and teaching them these dynamic, you know, speed differentials on the VO65.
Well, the next boat to come across the finish line will be Viva Mexico. Third place in the coastal here in Genoa, Italy, is a very strong way to finish the Ocean Race Europe. This team, I mean, it's got a lot of, shall we say, legacy on their shoulders. I mean, the first winner of the Ocean Race back in 1973, Seula 2, a Mexican team, and we haven't really seen Mexico in the race since then, but potentially things will change. Certainly a good start, some good peaks of performance there, and well, you can see from the smiles, a nice way to finish here in Italy. Well, behind Viva Mexico, we are waiting for the rest of the VO65s to come through. It's very tempting to bring you the projected scores, but perhaps we should just stay off until we get a few more of these positions coming in. Axonabel Ocean Racing, Ambersail 2, and Team Childhood as well to come through. There is, though, your race winner and your event winner. Merpuri Foundation Racing Team, and Sally, I mean, a strong team. If you'd have placed a bet at the beginning of this event, it would have been on this boat.
That's right. They've done their homework. They've done the most training. They have the discipline they need. But, you know, the first leg of the race, we saw them have some bad luck, and they had to fight hard from there. So, what a good challenge for them to be put under pressure, especially in this last coastal race. Let me tell you, these conditions, anything sub 10 knots in these boats, it's hard to call tactics. It's hard to get the maneuvers perfectly to not lose too much boat speed. And you know, really good job on this whole team and this whole project as they've you know, produced such a broad range of ability.
And here comes the next boat coming across. This will be fourth place in the coastal race here in Genoa, Italy. It will be Axonabel Ocean Racing, and unfortunately for them, the boat that came into this final day of racing in second place on the overall scoreboard will slip back. They will slip back into third place. We're just waiting for those results to be confirmed, but that seems to be the way that the numbers are pointing. And, you know, Sally, we talked about Merpuri Foundation Racing Team being that little edge ahead of everybody else, but for Chris Nicholson and the crew on board Axonabel Ocean Racing, they were the boat that put them under pressure. You know, this was the team that Johan Rochon was worried about.
Yeah, I mean, they have a ton of experience on this boat, and, you know, Chris Nicholson and his whole team coming together, you know, really good dynamic. But perhaps they just don't have the hours on the water together. You see some, you know, some long faces there because they know that, okay, we got some gains to make here as a team, and we sort of projected ourselves to perform better than this, and we're losing a place on the overall spot today, and, you know, we're not crossing the line in the top three, and, you know, their hearts are in it, obviously, and I think it's a cool thing to see that the team is new but has so much more, has potential, and they actually feel it. They know they should be racing at a higher level.
Well, there are the VO65s, or at least four of them finished, but let's go back to the Imoca 60s, because there is an incredible competition unfolding at the moment in this fleet, with the three podium place boats of 11th Hour Racing Team, Offshore Team Germany, and Linked Out, all fanned out across this run. And Sally, just from that tracker shot, look at the difference in angle with 11th Hour Racing Team very happy to sail high.
And I would call that a VMG gain with 8.9 knots there for 11th Hour Racing, and moving forward on Offshore Team Germany. We know that they have a jibe into the finish, but from right now they're making gains forward enough to jibe and cross, and, you know, a bit sticky here on Offshore Team Germany, 6.7, 6.8, going lower and slower than Linked Out and 11th Hour. So from this angle here, it looks like a loss for Offshore Team Germany.
And I wonder, I mean, Linked Out they don't really look like they've had a lot of options there, because they come up to try and match the angle of 11th Hour Racing Team. You go straight into the dirty wind of Offshore Team Germany. So Offshore Team Germany do look like they're going, fine, we'll let Charlie Enright and the Americans, they're playing this one well, we'll let them go. Or at least we'll be more concerned about locking down Thomas Rian and the crew on board Linked Out. Here's 11th Hour Racing Team, and you can see just how much space they have got over the top of themselves. They have got they've got all sorts of room. Emery Ross just having a little bit of a look out with Justin Matrew just down to leeward. The boat, you can see just going out of picture on the right-hand side. That was one of the VO65s, the Austrian Ocean Race project, which is still to finish. Struggling on this downwind without the A4 compared to the other VO65s. But for the Imoca 60s, it's not so spread out in the lead. 11th Hour Racing Team, I mean, that's a rather nice downwind sail. But the question is, where are they compared to Offshore Team Germany and Linked Out? Pascal Badigri taking his turn on the grinders inside. So we are about a quarter of a run left to go here for 11th Hour Racing. And Sally, we were talking about, you were mentioning that VMG gain for 11th Hour Racing Team sailing on that left-hand side. But ultimately, they do have another jibe to go, and Offshore Team Germany maybe not have another jibe to go, or at least if they do, it's going to be at the last minute.
I agree with you. They're still long here on this jibe, which means that 11th hour, you know, the higher they sail, the longer they have to sail back to the finish on the other jibe. So it's hard to say, you know, when we were on board with there's Offshore Team Germany and Linked Out. If we can get a relative based on 11th hour, we'll have a little bit better of an idea. But everybody with their big, nice downwind sails up. I would say here with the jibe in, it's going to be tricky for Offshore Team Germany to stay ahead of Linked Out, which I think is a big deal when we come into this finish line.
So Linked Out, they are to leeward. They are to the right. If you were, you know, orientating yourself on this camera, they are to the right of the other two Imoca 60s that they need to keep an eye on. Offshore Team Germany close to the left, and then to windward and quite a bit is 11th Hour Racing Team. And working pretty hard on that helm. With the Imoca 60s, we're used to seeing the autopilot doing a lot of the work, but in these light winds, off the breeze, that's when you just need that little bit of human instinct on the tiller. So as the camera pans around there, you can see Offshore Team Germany, and I would say that with the dirty air, I would say that Offshore Team Germany are actually casting their wind shadow in front of Linked Out. I would say the French haven't had a chance to sail through it yet.
That's a tricky angle as well. You see, we were here with the French, like a super eased and open downwind sail. And to me, that means they're trying to press as low of an angle as possible. A nice big twist in the mainsail. They're not trying to heat it up and go fast. They're trying to take leverage to leeward of Offshore Germany, which I'm guessing means they definitely have a jibe in. And I think we saw 11th Hour Racing jibe cross ahead. So if Linked Out can stay ahead of Team Germany, we might see a mix-up here.
I mean, maybe Linked Out here are trying to do what we thought Sailing Poland, or certainly what Sailing Poland looked like they were going to do, which is setting up for that jibe, that rotation, and then the attack out of the jibe. Certainly Linked Out are, like you say, they're happy to sail that little bit lower. So Offshore Team Germany are being faced with a little bit of a challenge. And here are the scores, and look at that, 15, 15, 15, a tie on points. If the Imoca 60s finish in these positions, the tie break going to positions on the water in the last race, which will be this one. So right now, 11th Hour Racing Team are in the lead, and with the points the way they roll out, they will be winning the Ocean Race Europe. Linked Out will be a second, and Offshore Team Germany will be knocked into third place. But we still have some distance left to run, and we still have some jibes left to go. So Linked Out sailing low, perhaps trying to set themselves up for the jibe, perhaps trying to limit the number of turns that they need to do to get into this finish line. 11th Hour Racing, they are facing a jibe, and they are going to need to do it very soon. And in fact, the tracker being slightly behind the pictures, they have done just that. So 11th Hour Racing Team now on the other jibe, and now converging to the other boats, and we'll have to see what their path is into this compared to Offshore Team Germany. So there we can see 11th Hour Racing Team with the finish line ahead of them, and they're certainly working pretty hard. And I just saw Simon Fisher cracking a bit of a smile there, Sally. So maybe that was about the positions that they are on the water. And if they are doing well on this left-hand side, it's because they've sailed their angle downwind. They did something quite bold.
They did, and you know, to me it backs all the way up to that port tack ley line going upwind. Being a little bit over that ley line, great boat speed, waiting for offshore Team Germany to have an extra maneuver to make a little bit of a mistake. And then 11th hour just plowing through, having a nice mark rounding, getting their big kite up, and yeah, sailing their correct angle for what the boat's performance is capable of downwind, staying ahead of the boats they need to.
They look nice on this downwind. Just trim that spinnaker, don't let it flog. There we go. we are at a point where if you lose the power from that big downwind sail, even for just a couple of seconds, it might make the difference here. We're just waiting to see offshore Team Germany and Linked Out coming into view. That blue sail is the Austrian Ocean Race project, finishing later, and I mean, that's quite a bit of a spread there, but you can just see the black sails of offshore Team Germany. Oh, no, there they are to the right. I apologize. They are a lot closer than we thought. So that is Linked Out with the white kite on the right-hand side. Offshore Team Germany just out of view on the picture on the right. So 11th Hour Racing Team, that was what that smile that Simon Fisher was pulling. They have played this run very nicely indeed. It's an easy cross. Charlie Enright just confirming it. And if you need to look behind you to confirm the cross, that's good. You know, offshore Team Germany, they are right now, they need to shift gears. They need to be worried about Linked Out. They need to be thinking about, well, what can we do here to try and hold on to what we've got?
The good thing is it looks like offshore Team Germany have pulled forward a tiny bit on Linked Out, which means they maybe have a little bit of a leverage for the jibe. And remember, when they do jibe, they'll be coming back on starboard. So they'll be talking a ton about the ley line. If they jibe, will they have clear air or not? But here's 11th Hour Racing. Like, all of a sudden, a little bit of calmness on the boat, right? They've crossed their competitors. They're aiming in towards the finish. They're making the small adjustments, but really well done on knowing the angle to sail on this downwind.
And they are really close to the finish now. They're going to be crossing this finish line pretty soon. But the thing for them is you can't celebrate. I mean, you can celebrate the win here in the coastal race, but the overall scoreboard is not going to be decided until we see where offshore Team Germany come across the finish line. 11th Hour Racing Team coming into that finish. This will be 3 points in the coastal going for them. But if with those points, that will put them on to 15 overall. If offshore Team Germany, that are currently right now on 14 points, if they come second, they get 2 points, that'll put them on 16. And that will mean that the German team will still hold on to that top spot and will win the Ocean Race Europe. So here's the point for Charlie Enright and the rest of the crew on board 11th Hour Racing Team. You've done everything you can do in this coastal race. Now it is just up to see what your rivals can do on the water. Now, the finish line for 11th Hour Racing Team behind them, but the big question is what's happening behind them with offshore Team Germany. So 11th Hour Racing Team coming into the finish. Just waiting to see if we can get a glimpse of offshore Team Germany. Bureau Valet, they are a good way back. They are not going to cause a split in the pairings or a split in the points. So it is still going to be that question as to what happens between Linked Out and offshore Team Germany. That is the race that matters at the moment. 11th Hour Racing Team, a few boat lengths from the finish line. Here they go across the finish line. That's the 3 points, the maximum available for Charlie Enright and the team. But we're not going to see any big celebrations. The eyes are straight away going to be going out the back, because the question will be, what happens now? What do the Germans do? Charlie Enright having a little look for himself. What happens with the boats behind? Where is offshore Team Germany and Linked Out? Well, Linked Out to windward, offshore Team Germany to leeward. It looks like Linked Out, Sally, sailing a little bit high, maybe trying to get some dirty air onto Robert Stanjek.
Yeah, totally different mode than the last jibe. They need to get forward on offshore Team Germany to then press down to the finish. And you know, it's just going to come down here to inches, I think, into the finish line. And there's the view. I think offshore Team Germany has a little bit of clear air from behind, but, you know, hard to say. But, you know, pressure's up here. They just need to squeak across the finish line just ahead of Linked Out, and they will hold their position.
It looks to me like they're both sailing quite low. They're both linked out, are trying to come low to try and cause some disturbance on offshore Team Germany. Offshore Team Germany are trying to stay low to try and stay out of it. And the finish line is slightly ahead for these boats. They're going to cross it on this jibe. So if offshore Team Germany, I guess staying low just keeps their breeze a little bit clearer.
It does, but here's the risk. You see linked out pressing down over offshore Team Germany, making gains, and it's going to be super tricky. It's going to come down to the angle of the finish line and probably just inches here. You see offshore Team Germany now pushing forward and trying to gain forward and trying to cross the line first.
Linked out, I mean, you can see just how little pressure there is in that kite. They are certainly doing the low mode, trying to rotate. Offshore Team Germany at the moment still have the speed. The question is how long is this battle going to run? You can see the committee boat coming into view on the left-hand side, and linked out are really pushing down here, Sally. They're sacrificing any forward speed just to try and lock in the German team here, and there's not a lot that offshore Team Germany can do. The finish line there on the left-hand side, the white and blue hull just on the left-hand side of the picture with the yellow mark, that's the pin end. Linked out, soaking low, partly to get through the line, partly to attack offshore Team Germany. Offshore Team Germany desperately trying to finish ahead of the French. If they do, they win the Ocean Race Europe. 11th Hour Racing Team watching closely from the sidelines. All their hard work is done. They need linked out to finish ahead of Robert Stanjek and the rest of the team, but it looks like offshore Team Germany are just managing to keep the breeze in their sail. Linked out, sailing dangerously low, desperately trying to affect the spinnaker of offshore Team Germany, but still it's got breeze, still it's pulling, and they're just pushing their bow out. Half a boat length clear. Offshore Team Germany sailing clear now. They are going to sail through the line first, linked out to windward. They can't affect them anymore. They desperately tried to take the breeze. All that offshore Team Germany need to do now is bear away, sail through that line, and what a finish. Offshore Team Germany, narrowly, by the thinnest of margins, hold on to what all their hard work has given them. They win the Ocean Race Europe in spectacular fashion.
Wow, that was amazing. To me, that was all about that ley line in on offshore Team Germany. They just nailed it. If they were above that ley line, they wouldn't have held it. And if they were below that ley line to the pin, they also wouldn't have held it. So hats off to them. Awesome call on board, and really good job staying just calm in that tough moment.
And like you say, I mean, for linked out there, you just saw that little bit of disappointment. Of course, I mean, it would have come down to just holding on to that jibe for just another 10 seconds, maybe just sailing a little lower, just a little bit earlier. But what a good attack from the French, and what a great defense for offshore Team Germany. It looked like they didn't panic. They knew that they needed to go low, but not too low. It would have been so easy to trip up in that situation.
Yeah, and what a way to finish this last couple weeks of racing. You know, you can't ask for anything better. The boats are fighting right to the finish line, having to push angles, and I tell you what, the big gains for these sailors is how much they're learning about these boats, and you know, really awesome to see these IMOCAs in the fight in these close races.
Incredible finish for... You get the feeling that they're already debriefing these kind of moments, aren't they? They're already thinking about the next one. What are we going to do differently? I mean, a really, really good fight. I mean, linked out, certainly in terms of the offshore legs, this boat was... you know, statistically, this is the one that was really been performing. Coram coming into the finish line now. We haven't seen the best of Coram yet. Bureau Valley, again, are behind them. We haven't seen the best of them. So let's have a little bit of a look at the scores here. Let's confirm what we have seen out on the water here. So the provisional results yet to be ratified, but we all saw those positions of where the fleets were. The overall positions for the VO65 Merpuri Foundation Racing Team taking the win in the Ocean Race Europe, sailing Poland in second place, Akzo Nobel Ocean Racing in third, the tiebreak just going the way of the Polish team. So that was the VO65. So very, very tight battle out in the water here for the Coastal. Let's go now to the IMOCA 60s. And we're still with some boats racing. So, of course, predicted scores for those two teams out on the water. But we're fairly confident of where the two remaining boats are going to finish. And there we have it. Offshore Team Germany still in that top spot, but my word, wasn't it close. They win the Ocean Race Europe in the IMOCA 60 class. 11th Hour Racing Team takes second, and Linked Out get pushed back into third place in a spectacular showdown all the way to the finish. Well, as Coram and Bureau Valet come across the finish line to bring racing to a close here for the IMOCA 60s and all 12 of our boats. It's been a fantastic day out in the water. It didn't look like we were going to get much racing, but wow, did it deliver. Two victorious teams in the Ocean Race Europe, and what a fantastic few legs it has been. We hope you enjoy it, and we look forward to seeing you for the next start of the Ocean Race.